Hello, hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and I do a book review a week, mixing up a cocktail while I review it. It's called Books and Booze. This month we've been looking at books about firearms makers, and this week's book of the week is kind of a recap of some of the great firearms. American Gun, The History of the U.S. in 10 Firearms by Chris Kyle. Sub William Doyle, because Kyle was killed before the publication of this book. I mean, he'd written the bulk of the text, but Doyle stepped in to kind of round it out and make sure all the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. This is my understanding of it. The accompanying cocktail is called the Smoking Gun. It is 3 ounces of gin, 1 ounce of vodka, a ½ ounce of Grenadine, a ½ ounce of Orange Liqueur, and a cherry to garnish. You can also use dry ice for a garnish smoking effect. I will not be doing that because I already play with firearms. I don't need to add the possible ingestion of a toxic substance to the mix. And yes, if you ingest dry ice, it can kill you. Dry ice is not frozen water. It is solid carbon dioxide. Ingestion of it can cause severe internal burns and possibly rupture your stomach. So I'm not including it in mine. If you choose to include it in yours, the recipe says about a teaspoon of it. Drink with caution. Make sure you don't drink that. Let me start by saying this book is exactly as it is advertised. It is a history of the United States as told through the firearms that helped make her such a great country. And like any good storyteller, Chris Kyle starts at the beginning with the American long rifle, aka the Kentucky rifle. The Kentucky rifle was, well, basically the first generation sniper rifle ever. I mean, prior to this, you guys may not know this, but the reason it's called a rifle is because of the rifling in the barrel. Before that, they were all muzzle loaders. They were smoothbore muzzle loaders. Yes, long guns, but the accuracy was just not there. The rifling is that twist. You know, you guys all hear, if you ever watch any true crime shows, they talk about the rifling in the barrel and how that the lands and grooves match. The lands and grooves are the rifling, and that's what makes this long gun such an effective sniper rifle, is the accuracy that rifling imparted, basically. So the long rifle, the American long rifle, is what allowed, it assisted America. I'm not going to say it was the sole thing, but it was what assisted and allowed America to win the Revolution, not least of which was through the sniper actions made possible by that rifling. The British thought this was very ungentlemanly, not least of which is because the primary targets were officers, which they thought was a bit of a war crime to target the officers specifically. But as the fat electrician says,
but to find out the hard way, it's never a war crime the first time.
Those tactics for us, the targeting of officers from a distance, led to eventual freedom and the founding of a new nation. Descendants of that rifle were brought into the Western expansion and used in Texas when Texas was first fighting for freedom and independence from Mexico, up until she joined the Union. So each chapter includes not just the gun titled in the chapter, but the firearms around it and how that came to be and why he picked this particular rifle or pistol to make his top 10, I guess. Let's shake this up and get me some alcohol to cool me down. The next rifle he looked at was the Spencer repeating rifle, which was covered in last week's book, Gun Barons. But Kyle discusses how adoption of the Spencer rifle earlier in the war could have significantly shortened the duration of the Civil War and why this is so. And I kind of agree with him. Abraham Lincoln was beset by problems with his ordnance officer who felt that new tech was bad, just basically a dinosaur of a man. Next up, we look at the first pistol on Kyle's list, which is the Colt Single Action Army Revolver. Drop the Grenadine. Boom. No layering. Just drop it in. So the Colt Single Action Army Revolver is, I believe, the favorite pistol of the Single Action Shooters Society. Come on, open up. And one of the best parts, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the best parts of this book is he doesn't just discuss the gun in question. He provides details and context for other significant firearms at that time being discussed. So at this chapter, he introduces the rivalry between Colt and Smith & Wesson, which was again discussed in detail in Gun Barons. Now, Kyle's book was written first. He said it was finished, the bulk of the text was finished before he died in 2013, and I believe he died in February of 2013. And his wife Taya took over to work with his friends and publisher to complete like the fact checking and everything else. However, having said that, I don't want somebody to get the bizarre idea that John Bainbridge, the author of Gun Barons, was copying Kyle. I mean, you could stop that right there. There are hundreds of other sources that provide the exact same information. It's not at all unheard of for more than one person to reach the same conclusion reading the same sources or even different sources. Frankly, the more people that tell the same story, refer to the same information, the more it bolsters the validity of the information being told. I was listening to Thomas Massey interview a few weeks ago, and he said he reads 3 books on any topic and goes with the consensus. Now, he was talking about plumbing his own house, but the advice is still solid. If multiple sources report the same information, then it's probably close to what happened. I say close because none of us were there. We can't really know for sure. Let's try this because it's a very full cocktail, and I don't want to spill it on me. Surprisingly neutral. Has a little bit of a bite from the gin, because gin, if you don't know, is made from juniper berries. It's billed, I'm using Roku gin, it's billed as 100% grain neutral spirits. Maybe it is, I don't know. It's good, it's okay. It's not as sweet as I might expect with grenadine in it, but it's not awful. The chapter on cold, Kyle provides a nice recap of Tombstone and the OK Corral, and I have a more detailed book on this by Tom Clavin, which I haven't read yet, and I kind of want to read sooner rather than later now. Although at this point it's going to have to be later. I pretty much already have my reading list for the rest of 2024 set up. Back to this book, American Gun. Put this one right here, the one we're talking about this week. Next up was the Winchester 1873, aka the gun that won the West, which was a brilliant piece of marketing on the part of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, since many guns contributed to the winning of the West, not least of which was the Colt Single Action Army. Kyle talks about the infamous Dalton Gang and their raid on Coffeyville, Kansas, which was also mentioned in the Guns of John Moses Browning. Hey, I said his name without stumbling. Kyle's not wrong when he says nothing says cowboy like the look of the lever-handled Kyle's not wrong when he says nothing says cowboy like the look of the lever action handle on the rifle, on the Winchester rifle, right? That lever pumping action. In this chapter, he discusses the Sharps rifle, from which we get the term sharpshooter, not least of which is a shot made at Adobe Walls, Texas, which is a trading outpost. And on July 27, 1874, it was besieged by Indians, probably Comanche, because it was in Texas, and I believe that was their usual area. And the sniper Billy Dixon took up a Sharps rifle that they happened to have in stock and knocked out a mounted Indian warrior who was leading the raid. This broke up the siege, essentially, and the shot was later measured by U.S. Army surveyors at 1,538 yards. That is over 3/4 of a mile. 0.8 miles to be precise, which is an absolutely insane shot to make with iron sights. Like, there's a reason the Sharps rifle was used in the movie Quigley Down Under, and it wasn't all fiction that you could make a shot from that far away with iron sights using a Sharps rifle. There's, like I said, a reason they're called sharpshooters. Also, people who think you can only be accurate with a scope, practice more. We move into the M1903 Springfield rifle, which was the first major upgrade adopted by the U.S. Army, which includes the Spencer repeating rifle. The only reason that made it such an appearance on the battlefields of the Civil War was basically massive purchases on behalf of that select officers made on behalf of their own companies. They just put their own money into it, and sometimes their men would pay them back, and sometimes they wouldn't. But that's pretty much the only reason it even made an appearance, is because of the ordnance officer, who was James Ripley. Yeah, I believe it was James Ripley was the ordnance officer in charge, who said, "No, breech-loading rifles were good enough for my pappy. It was good enough for all of us." Or not breech-loaders, muzzle-loaders. He hated breech-loaders, didn't like new tech. The 1903 was made as almost a direct rip-off from the Spanish-made Mauser used during the Spanish-American War, and was so closely related to that design that the U.S. government actually ended up paying royalties to the Mauser plant in Germany, which, not quite sure how that played out with World War I and the M1903 making its first real appearance in modern warfare against the Germans in World War I. No real list of the best guns ever would be complete without the M1911, the brainchild of one John Moses Browning. We discussed that quite a bit. And it's essentially the progenitor of every automatic pistol invented since it was adopted by the U.S. Army in time for World War I. No joke. His designs were that innovative, and they're solid. They just keep working. Next up was the Thompson submachine gun, which is absolutely iconic for a multitude of reasons. I mean, everybody knows what a Thompson looks like, right? It was made by John Thompson, the same officer who recommended the Army adopt a .45 caliber firearm, which led to the invention of the M1911. And he completed the submachine gun just after World War I ended. And basically, with no new conflicts looming, sales were really slow to start with until Prohibition started and it became the favorite of gangsters across the country. And it was basically a criminal's weapon for the first decade of its existence, all the way up until World War II, when it was finally adopted by the military and used extensively by the Greatest Generation as they fought for freedom in Europe. Definitely a little bitter. I'm not sure what to make of this. It's okay. I bet it looks really cool with dry ice in it, but not cool enough for me to do it, and I probably won't make one again. But it's okay. Next up was along with the Thompson submachine gun, we had the M1 Garand, which was adopted by the U.S. military for World War II. The M1 Garand was a beast. I mean, it could take an absolute beatdown and just keep on firing. It was also the platform that would inspire the M14 and the M16 down the line. Now, he does give a nod to the AK-47, which is undisputably a solid rifle, right? That's the Automat Kalashnikov is what the AK stands for. It was developed in 1947. Russian firearm, and it is still highly coveted by a great many people because it's a solid piece of equipment that can also take a beating and just keep on ticking. The last pistol discussed was the .38 Special Police Revolver, which was wildly popular by law enforcement and appeared because it was inexpensive. It was inexpensive and it could shoot, I think, .357, it could be chambered for .357, .38 Special, .38 long round, .38 short round. I have a snub nose myself, which is hilarious because it perfectly fits my hand, and basically every guy I've ever met wants to shoot it because, hey, it's a .38 revolver, right? It's iconic. It was one of the designs used by the Secret Service when they were defending President Harry Truman against an assassination attempt in 1950. And it's funny because that I know was in the book I read on Truman, and I don't think I discussed it in my review, probably because he survived. I don't know. I mean, obviously he survived. He ended up, I do know that one of the guards who died, actually I think only one person died, only one guard died, and that was Leslie Caufelt. He was killed. The assassin who shot him was initially sentenced to death, and Truman commuted his sentence to life in prison because he didn't want this guy to become a martyr to the Puerto Rican causes, which that's what he was there for, was like freedom for Puerto Rico. I don't recall the specifics. I know it was in the Truman book. I am hoping to find out why Jimmy Carter pardoned the shooter. Pardoned him. Let him go. Guy tries to kill a president. So, yeah, it's a giant fuck you from the Democrats to everybody else. That's for future Katrina to find out. When am I reading Carter? I think November. Hold on. I can tell you. Carter is on my read list for October. I'll be reading about Jimmy Carter. And we'll see if we can figure out why he pardoned a would-be assassin. We round out our jaunt through U.S. history with the M16, which is still partially in use, but is being replaced by the M4 carbine, the M14, M16, M4. These are all basically descendants of the M1 Garand. I really enjoyed this book. It was very well organized. It naturally flowed from one topic to the other. He like I said, he doesn't just explain the firearms that are the chapter headers. He explains how the other guns in that era contributed to what was going on in the nation at the time, and why he ended up picking the one he picked to be his designated top 10, or one of his top 10. This was a good history, or like a brief history of America, as told by the firearms that created us and made us a United States. It was very well done, a very fast read. It didn't struggle to hold my attention like some books that I've made myself read for this channel. It was well done. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday when we read about Lyndon B. Johnson. Bye.